And my friend, he was up for a big promotion and he applied for it and he didn't get it. And I congratulated him on not getting it. I was so happy for him for not getting it because it would have been the worst thing for him because he's in a role he really likes. But and he applied for it because, I don't know, it was a good opportunity, big pay increase, and more responsibility, more status, more pay, more all that. But I knew deep down that may not have been really what he wanted.
All right. Hello and welcome. It's Never About Money community. This one is an interesting one. I feel like I found someone in the US that is doing something quite similar, similar-ish, if that's a word, to what we're doing here at the It's Never About Money podcast. And I'm delighted that I've got executive financial coach, podcaster, speaker. The podcast, it's called Meaning Over Money. And I'm delighted to have Travis Shelton here with me. How are you, Travis?
Very good. Thanks so much for having me.
So yes, Travis, thanks for coming on. I'm excited to see where this goes. I think we're talking offline before about the fact that we both are coming at the idea of what's important in life from the same philosophical standpoint, but we may have different ideas or reasons why we got there. I just wanted to, as a starting point, ask you, what's your background and how did you come to the conclusion that you have, and how did you come to to have a podcast named Meaning Over Money?
Well, yeah. So it's so good to be here. I thought it's worth mentioning. My introduction to you and your podcast was my publicist reached out to me and she said, "Travis, I found the Australian version of Meeting Over Money," and she had me at that. I'm like, I want to meet this guy. So this is a real pleasure for me. My journey, I think we need to go back to the mid 2000s, and I graduated college and I was in commercial real estate, and I had this wonderful career, and I was investing in real estate all over the U.S. And I was in this great company, and I just really felt I had life figured out. I had a job that seemed to have a pretty high trajectory, and coworkers that felt like family. I found my people. I bought a house, found a church, met a girl, and I just thought I had my whole life locked in. That is until I walked into the office one day in 2008. It was right at the front end of the great financial crisis, and I walked into the office where I was pulled into a conference room where I met all of my coworkers, and we were told that the company was being shut down and everybody was fired. And that was a really heavy moment for me, considering I had my whole life figured out. Okay, I had arrogantly thought that, but here we are, and this new reality hit me square in the face. And in that moment, I realized I might have some problems. And they went on eventually to say, "Travis, we want to offer you a job." I was in Kansas City, I'm in Missouri, and they asked if I wanted to move up to Des Moines, Iowa, and to continue to do the work I'm doing to solve some of the problems we have in our real estate portfolio. And I didn't really want to, but I had a problem, and that problem was I had a whole bunch of debt, and I kind of needed the money through an income to pay the debt, and I didn't really have a choice. And I was watching my friends really struggle being unemployed, and the market was terrible for real estate professionals, and it was just a really dark time. And I had been engaged for 3 days, and that was not ideal. And so I had to go tell my new fiance of 3 days that because of maybe my stupidity, that we need to make this decision. And we decided together we're going to move, and we're going to start over, and we're going to start our marriage in a different state. And that's what we did. And we didn't want to, but we did everything the way the world said to do it. You borrow at a low rate and you invest at a higher rate. We were doing a lot of the things that the world says to do, especially in the finance world where I was. But I realized it works really great until the moment it doesn't. And so we decided we're going to move, but we're going to do things different. We're never going to let money again dictate our life. And that wasn't meaning over money. That was just we feel like we deserve better than to let money dictate our most critical decisions in life. As we eventually started to navigate life together, we eventually paid off our debt, and my career started to really prosper, and it was great. I really enjoyed my career, and I had this moment where I was asking myself, if this money stuff makes us happy, and I'm looking around to all my clients and my coworkers and everybody around me, and I thought, if money makes us happy, this should be the happiest place on this side of Disney World, and it wasn't. There was a lot of pain, and there was a lot of frustration. There was tension, broken relationships, and I thought, okay, maybe money's not the answer. And I started to reflect on my own life, and I didn't feel any happier or more fulfilled than I did back when I was poor and in debt. And that really started to get me thinking about these ideas. And as my career continued to prosper, I'm looking around and I'm watching so many people around me hurt when it comes to money. And I'm watching them struggle so much. And I start to realize one of the reason people are struggling is because they are focusing on the money. They're dwelling on the money. They're pursuing the money. And in doing so, they're making a lot of choices that are sabotaging their ability to live a meaningful life. Therein lies the tension that I saw. And about 4 years ago, I made a decision alongside my wife. We took a very large pay cut and we decided to start over. And I resigned from that career and we started what I do now, which is coaching families and businesses, helping them unlock a meaningful life by aligning their work and their money with their values. And thus began this journey with podcasts and writing and speaking. And so that's the origin story of where I come from.
It's um, it's really quite amazing. I think you've discovered in that period of time that when you use money as kind of like a key performance indicator for your success or the value of your life, it's unsustainable because there's peaks and troughs, and when is it ever enough? And when are you completely at ease that if you didn't have it, you wouldn't be completely crushed and immobilized by?
Yeah, that's the whole that's the problem with more. Every time you get more, more is still, well, it's more. And you can never catch up with more. And that's where our society, our modern day society has got us.
And so, just to summarize around the why you took that kind of career change and took a pay cut, what was the what was the fundamental what was the fundamental reason there? Because you're in a pretty lucrative real estate sort of business that, I mean, eventually would have come back, and you could have stuck it out. But
Well, I mean,
where did you see yourself if you did stick it out?
in that moment, it had come back in full force. Things were
Yeah,
amazing.
sure.
It was
Yeah.
amazing. And towards the
Yep.
end of my time, I was my clients were in the Middle East and in Europe.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so I was spending a lot of time in the Middle East with my clients, and it was great. And the compensation was really good. And what was told to me, it was going to be much better very soon.
Mhm.
I think, and ultimately, we took about a 90% pay cut. And it's
Mhm.
not because of how much I was making, it's how low we went to. When we left, we essentially started over and had a pay that didn't even bear we couldn't even take care of our family. I had 2 3-year-olds at the time. I had twin 3-year-old boys. So when we left, I mean, we took a drastic life change, and I think I can really sum it up to say, I just felt this call in my life that I couldn't ignore anymore.
Mm. Mm.
And people always ask, "Travis, how did you do that with your wife? Like, how did she let you do that?" And I said, "Let me. She made me." She knew 2 years ahead of me, maybe 3 years, that this is where I needed to be. She knew this is where I was called to be, and so she was kinda leaning on me for a couple of years, and I'm so grateful for her humility to let that possibility happen, because there was some real costs to that in terms of our lifestyle and our rhythm, and it was really hard, and I would say it was far harder than I thought it was going to be, but it was way more worth it than I thought it would be.
So tell me, like, because you've got twins, and I'm an uncle of, I've got three, two nephews and a niece, and the nephew and the niece, the younger ones who are now four, are twins as well. And so, and they actually I just did a little teaser on LinkedIn with Jacob and Sophia sitting in the other chair, just chatting to them, and that was kind of cool. So when you said twins, it was quite funny to me. I just wonder, like, I'm not a parent, so I'm kind of wondering how it changed you becoming a parent, and whether or not it strengthened your resolve around these matters, or it became more of, well, actually, money is, I'm going to need to deal with this, because it's not just me and my partner or my wife. It's now the twins.
I think it absolutely impacted me becoming a father, especially getting a double dose with twins. I think where if I could say in any way it impacted me, it was really just affirming that there is so much more importance in life than money. And I think the natural reaction is, uh-oh, I have a lot more mouths to feed. I need to focus more on money. And I think my initial reaction was that. It was, I feel the weight and the responsibility. My wife stays at home. Her dream was to stay at home with her baby someday, which was one of her motivating factors to really partner with me in this endeavor to get out of debt, because it was the why. And her why was that she gets to stay home with babies, and that was her dream in life. And I dreamt that for her as well. And and so I think my initial reaction was, okay, there's a weight financially. We have to figure this out. But as I dove deeper into fatherhood and my kids started to grow a little bit, I realized time is precious. And the opportunity in front of us and the weight of being a parent is a very heavy weight and a heavy responsibility and an opportunity. And I didn't want to let money take the focus off of that. And so there is a reality. And I wrote a letter, an open letter to my kids when they were younger, when I left my job, and someday I'll give this to them. But I wrote a letter to my kids, and I shared with them that I think they deserve more than more. I think they deserve better than a higher standard of living. They deserve better than more things, better trips, cooler toys.
Mm.
And I really leaned into this idea that my kids deserve better than the material offerings of this world.
I completely understand that, and I wonder how that manifests itself. A bit of a divergence, but when we're talking about communicating these ideas, these philosophies, we're usually communicating them to an adult audience. The hope is that in our society, that somehow kids get a grasp of this idea earlier and sooner. And some of the work that I've started to have a look at is trying to work out how to communicate this kind of complex idea that we talk about, money being important, but also how important is it to children. Have you had a go at, and how do you communicate? I mean, your kids are quite young. I believe they're 5 years old, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Um,
they're almost 7 now.
oh,
Almost
so it was a
7.
while ago since I read that. Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
they grow
Uh,
quickly.
they do. Time flies.
Yeah, the
I
fly. Yeah.
there's 2 messages that I really talk about a lot in my family, and we don't obsess about money, we don't dwell on it. That's not something that I'm talking about at the dinner table every night, but there's 2 lessons that I continually reinforce with my kids. Serve others, give generously. That's it. If we serve others and give generously, those are the 2 principles to me that matter. And by serving others, when I was watching some of my friends navigate parenthood, what would happen is when dad or mom and dad or mom would go to work, they would say, they can't be here because they're going to work. And what I saw in the kids is that work became like it became a 4-letter word. It became a curse word to them. Work equals bad. Work equals not being with me. And so I wanted to shift that narrative, and so when my kids were even babies, I remember instead of saying I was at work, I said, "Daddy's going to help people. Dad's going to help people." And I remember I was in my old career, and I was saying this to my then 3-year-olds, and I said, "I'm going to help people." And my wife said, "Well, that not yet, you're just going to your other job." And I said, "No, all work is helping people. All work. When we go and we work, whatever we're doing, we're serving others in some capacity." And I wanted my kids to know that.
There's something amazing about what you've just said because it's like what you're doing is you're expressing an idea from an early age, planting a seed in your children about the fact that it's a career, it's work, but it also isn't devoid of meaning. But then you're also consolidating it almost in a mantra-like fashion to yourself that what I am doing is fronting up to help others, and that can inform your day. That can change your day, and I know it does because often when I'm feeling like I'm just rocking up in a mundane way, I will often look at um, a document that I've created where I've had emails or calls from clients who have been grateful for something that we've done collectively. And I will scan that. So I remind myself of the good work that I do. Because again, working with money as a financial advisor sometimes can feel um, like, what am I doing? What am I contributing? I have to remind myself, and it's not the money; it's all of the other bits and pieces that you help clients with that might be linked to money. So I just love the way you've kind of articulated that because it's helping your children, but it's also helping you.
It it absolutely is, and it's getting harder too because my kids, they want me around. They wanna be with their dad, and so it gets hard sometimes, and I I that's so it is, it's an affirmation to me and them. When I'm leaving, I'm going to help people, and helping people is important, helping people matters, and what I hope that happens over time is that they understand the value of work, and they understand the value of serving others and giving generously. And I don't know what that will look like in their life, and it's gonna look different than mine, but I hope that they're able to connect those dots and figure out how do they want to serve others. And I'm gonna support however they want to do that, whatever they're called to do or feel passion towards. I wanna encourage that because we're uniquely called to serve others, and our work allows us to do that, and then we get to exchange that for money to live and to pay the bills and to take care of ourselves, and I think that's a beautiful concept.
It is. It is. So I just want to distill the concept between us and talk a little bit about how you might um, pitch the idea. I mean, obviously got the "It's Never About Money" podcast and the way that I communicate the idea, and it's a work in progress, and it has its own biases. It's but the idea is that on one hand, one side of the ledger, you have these really important fundamentals that make a meaningful life. Things like giving back, having a career of meaning, having deep relationships and um, happy and meaningful relationships with family and broadly others. Um, having your health and taking stock of your physical and mental health, and then having a degree of uh, personal growth and whether it be in the form of spirituality, whether you're tied to any form of your of religion, or whether it's simply you want to develop yourself personally in with your behaviors and your habits and all of that sort of stuff. So that sits on one side, and the other side, and before I finish, actually, on that side, there is also this financial security. There is financial security, and what I mean by that is a basic minimum means of survival that takes you off the fear that you will not have food security, shelter, these basic needs for yourself and the family. And then on the other side, so that's one side of the ledger. And then the other side, it's money. And my contention is, or my thought process is that if you are focused on the accumulation of money with little regard to the other aspects of life, then your ability to gain money is constrained, even though some can still accumulate quite a bit with that sort of focus. But it usually comes at a cost, and it comes at the cost is distortions in family relationships, health, feeling meaning in going to work every day. Um, so so I just wondered whether that resonates with you and how you might communicate that idea more eloquently than I've just tried. It's still my brain doesn't fire until about 11 a.m. Travis. So perhaps you can give me a hand here.
I think there's a lot of alignment in these ideas, and the way that I look at it and often talk about it is there's a perception that if you choose meaning, you are choosing a life of poverty. If you're choosing meaning, you are saying, "I will not have any money. I'm not gonna be able to pay my bills. I just am gonna be scraping by for the rest of my life." And I don't think that could be further from the truth. If you pursue money, you just might find it. You very well could find it. But if you choose meaning, you will find meaning, and you will have a deep, meaningful life, and you may also have some money along the way. And the reason I say that is because if you live with meaning, if you wake up in the morning and you're excited for what you're about to do, and you're pouring your blood, your sweat, your tears, everything, all your passions into whatever you're about to do today, you can't help but have some level of success versus the people that are in a job because it pays well and they're a slave to it. They're merely tolerating it. Maybe they hate it and they're there because they're punching the clock until they can finally get out of there and maybe go spend a little time before they have to do it again, and they'll do it for the next 20 years until they can quit their dumb job and go actually live their life and enjoy. And I think the people that live with meaning, they end up with more financial success oftentimes, not every time, but often because they live it with meaning. And I think that's it's a hard concept to understand because in our society, you're either choosing something you want to do or choose something that, like, or as people say, I either want to do work I enjoy or I can pay my bills. And I don't think it has to be one or the other. I'm not saying you have to choose meaning or money. I'm just saying choose meaning.
Mm. Choose meaning, and let's see where the money goes. I wonder whether there's some scenarios where individuals are chasing meaning that is not necessarily aligned naturally to money making necessarily, and that's just the state of play. What would you say to those people? And I think about musicians as an example. Like, I just had Michael Avery from the Richmond Music Academy and the Michael Avery School of Music on, and he's a business owner, and we talked about musicians, and they they would not do anything else. You know, like they really love what they do, but it's a hard job, and they honestly they can be the most talented people in the world, but
Mhm.
these days, unless you sort of produce a certain algorithm of pop music, it can be really tough to crack through and make money. Um, so, you know, what do we think about artists?
I think if there's certain work that we're gonna do, let's say musicians, maybe we say missionaries, maybe we say we're gonna start a nonprofit. You know, there's several things. Maybe you're saying, I want to be a youth sports coach. Like, there's a lot of different paths we can take. And when you take those paths, and if you're going to do it in the traditional sense, if you're going to be a missionary, or you're going to be, you're going to be a coach and you're going to coach youth sports in your local community, and it's a very linear approach to it, there is a reality that you are signing up for probably some limitation of income. And I think that that's where this whole idea is, do you find deep, fulfilling meaning in the work? And that's why I hypothesize, and I don't know what it looks like in Australia, but in the US, we have an epidemic of teachers leaving teaching. And that's one of those careers that I look at and say, that has to be a call. If you find deep meaning and purpose and fulfillment in what you're doing as a teacher, it's the greatest career ever. But if you don't, it's really hard. And there's a lot of challenges in that arena, and I think a lot of people, a lot of my clients are dealing with that, teachers that are really questioning, "Do I really wanna be there?" And what I would say is there are career paths that we will willingly take if we believe strong enough that it will provide a deep and meaningful life. And I would say those people that are living a deep and meaningful life that may never find the money are richer than most of us.
Mm, mm. The idea, I mean, it seems intuitive. I was asking the question, but I was kind of thinking about it at the same time that the areas of life that we all intuitively know are really, really super important that we were listing before, even if you don't have huge resources or significant resources, you can actually pursue them to have meaning in your career. Doesn't require a large amount of money to be able to give back through personal exertion, even if it not by financial means, can happen. You know, to be connected to your family and to spend time with your kids or your extended family. It's possible. All of these things are possible without necessarily um, significant financial resources. So then it comes to that concept of, okay, what about the baseline level of just having enough money to survive? Do we concede on that?
I think our society likes to play the game where you have to take this polar opposite approach or this polar opposite approach. And one or the other you have to take, and you can't have both, and you can't have anywhere in the middle. What I think is this whole okay, so this notion that money can't buy happiness. That's a notion. And so there's people that believe money cannot buy happiness. And there are people that believe, well, duh, money buys happiness. Of course it does. And the science proves, well, it's both. It's both that money makes us really, really happy. And this is my dramatic pause. It makes us really happy until our needs are met.
Yeah.
And if you think like intuitively, Joe, like that makes sense because if you don't have running water, if you don't have heat or air conditioning, if you don't have food, you don't have roof over your head, like your well-being is significantly impaired. So more money will absolutely drive happiness in those cases, and it's critically important that we do that. We need to have our basic needs met. And so this notion, so when I'm saying meaning over money, that we shouldn't chase money, we should chase meaning, of course, like we need to get our basic needs met at the foundational level. And so anybody that says that money cannot buy happiness in any shape or form, well, they've never been in those shoes then because those people are hurting. And I've had the privilege of walking along so many people that are really struggling, and that's important. And I always I look at life in terms of seasons. I believe at a macro level, we need to pursue meaning. We absolutely do. But in this season, right now, we need to put food on the table. We need to be able to make ends meet. We need to pay the bills because when you don't have those basic needs met, those walls close in real fast. And so this for a lot of my clients, it might be a season where they just need to do the work to connect those financial dots because that's where they're at. Not it's not where they're gonna be forever, that's where they're at today. And I think anything becomes possible if we look at it as a season. If we look at this life where it's just we're clawing and scraping just to try to pay the rent every month and we're lucky every month that we do, if we perceive that as our reality in perpetuity, that's really hard reality to continue down that road on. But when we look at it as this is a season and we need to figure this season out, and then once we do, then we can move on to some other things. And I think it's disingenuous to say that everybody should just forget about money and we're always pursuing meaning and that money's always going to, it can't buy any happiness because tell that to somebody who can't even have running water. It will.
Mhm. And the idea of it's never about money, I mean, it talks to the idea that it's never about money once what you've just discussed. is actually taken taken care of. Um, so you mentioned the science as well, and I was just wondering what sort of science is out there around um, advocating or affirming some of the conversations we've already had to this point.
You mentioned the $90,000 number, and that was from a similar study where they've shown that in that 90,000 US when that was done. But that was essentially this idea that money makes us really happy until our needs are met, and then a little bit more, and then the line tapers off. And so if you're looking at it like on a graph, it looks like a very steep line, and then once you get your basic needs met, it really tapers off and it doesn't go up all that much. But I think the problem that we have is that a lot of us started at a place where our basic needs were maybe not met or they were barely met. And so we've had a season of life where money did make us happy. When you could barely pay the rent, I remember I've had stretches in my young life where I hope to have the groceries and I hope to have the rent paid. I remember that from when I was late teens, early 20s. And I remembered money made me really happy then because actually got to pay my bills. But so we do these mental gymnastics though, and we do this thing where we think to ourselves, okay, if this much money made us happy, just imagine what this is gonna make us, and what about that next bunch and that next bunch, and that's where we fall into the curse of more because we experience the front end of the curve, and what happens is we get to the curve where it flattens, and we're still expecting the exponential increase in happiness, and that's not really what's going on, and there's a concept that I love, and it comes up in my coaching all the time, but there's a concept called the hedonic treadmill.
Yes.
Are you familiar with it?
Yes.
Yes, and so I'll just give the short version,
Yeah.
but the hedonic
No,
treadmill
please. Yeah, go for it.
is really this idea that anytime something happens to us, good or bad, it becomes normal. And they wanted to study this, and so they decided to take 2 opposite groups of people. They took people that won the lottery, and I'm not talking about the little scratch offs, I'm talking about I don't know if you have, like, the big checks, the big gaudy checks that they you
Oh
that
yeah. Oh
you
yeah.
take, you
I've seen them.
present you present in the news. So they
Yeah.
found the people that won those, the big stuff. And they thought, "Okay, who else do we study? Oh, let's study people that became paralyzed. They had an accident and they became paralyzed." And they said, "Let's study these 2 groups of people." And what they found was that the people who won the lottery were really happy, and that the people who became paralyzed were really unhappy. And that's the most captain obvious thing I could say. But what happened was they came back 6 months later and they found that the people who won the lottery, their happiness was back down to where it started. And the people who became paralyzed, their happiness went back up to where it started. The baseline was reset. And hopefully none of us are going to have accidents like that. And it's a tragedy when it does. And most of us aren't going to win the big gaudy checks. But we do face the hedonic treadmill every day. Whenever we whenever we get that promotion or that bonus or that big commission, maybe we buy that new car or we take that trip. There's a million moments in our life where we experience the hedonic treadmill, and when that happens, we don't feel it, but it resets us. And I had a client that the other day got a big promotion, like really, really good stuff. And they've been hoping for this for a long time. And they've worked hard. They've really pursued this. And they got this promotion. And they said, "Travis, I don't mean to sound ungrateful." And this is about 2 weeks post promotion. They said, "We don't mean to be ungrateful, but it doesn't really feel that exciting. It just kind of feels like normal now." And I said, "That's the hedonic treadmill in action."
It's amazing. This hedonic treadmill idea is so resonant with me. The idea that, like, earlier days in the business, we would be having sort of revenue targets, and when we'd meet them, I was decidedly uninterested. Like, I was like, yes. And then part of me's like going, yes. And then part of me's like going, who cares? Like, and then I would audit it, and then I would start to think about things like, okay, why is this revenue target important to me? And then I start to think about all the clients that I've actually been able to help, the meaning associated with working with my brother, in being able to achieve an arbitrary goal. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. It's the actual fact that I was working with him to be able to achieve that, rather than the actual number itself that made any kind of resonated with me at all. So this sort of idea that we pin ourselves to a certain financial number, I think it's what's behind the numbers that actually makes it more meaningful than the actual number itself.
I couldn't agree more. I think we have a real keen ability to use money as a measuring stick. It's a universal comparison tool that we can compare ourselves to our colleagues, our family, our friends, our neighbors, and we use it as a measuring stick, and then that drives some of our decision making because if we're successful, and let's say we have a nice income, we want others to know that we are successful. We want other people to know where we're at on the measuring stick, and we can't do that just by having success. We have to do that by taking an exotic trip and posting all the pictures on social media. We have to do that by upgrading our house and moving into a new neighborhood or upgrading our cars and getting something a little bit fancier. We do these things in part for the same reason that we're using it as a scorecard. We're using it as a measuring stick to compare ourselves to others and also to show others we compare very well. And I think we humans love to do that. And I think there's a real piece of that that's under the surface where we don't really it's not that important, but, like you said, it's never about money. It's really never about money's never about money. And I say that a lot, that money is never about money, it's always about something bigger. And and I think that you're getting to the heart of that. There's always something behind that. And I think if you ask yourself why, you peel back a few layers, I think you start to get to the real answer, and that's a scary answer to really confront with ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. I just wonder whether we'll explore this idea, and I don't know how it'll go, but as you were talking maybe 10 minutes ago, I reckon something came to mind, and it wasn't on my schedule to talk about, but this idea of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and intergenerational culture transferred from one generation to the next, and thinking about my own experience here. I was born in Melbourne, Australia. My father and my mother came from Egypt, and Egypt is a country where it's not like Australia. If you don't have money, it's a completely different scenario. There's no government, no government form of government support, and you like the health consequences of COVID were vastly different between our country, Australia, and Egypt, from what I loosely saw. But I could see that in my father's work ethic. I could see that in the drive for him to accumulate. And it did affect his capacity to spend time with his family. He self, in his own words and journaling, he described my mother being an angel because of her attending to the children while he was largely distracted by work. And um, he loved his career. He loved, you know, um, you know, helping others in academia, but he was also, by his own reflections, not entirely balanced. And when I look at the way that I early days in my 20s was operating as an advisor and as a business owner, I was just doing the same thing, just endless pursuit of working hard, driving, and really thinking about how can I amass an amount of money that helps my future, um, and to the expense of my happiness in the short term. And I thought to myself, I'm actually taking on a narrative and a culture that I'm actually not exposed to here. I mean, if I don't generate an income or if I lose a job, I'm in a pretty supportive environment compared to what my father was. Why do I continue to think this way and put myself under, or make choices that are moving me away from the meaning side of things? I think my father would have loved the fact that I have the opportunity to pursue meaning. That's why he probably came to this country. Um, so I feel like in some ways this podcast honors him by doing that. So I just wanted to explore that concept with you, because I mean this is the story of many migrant backgrounds. It's not my story alone.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing about your father. I love that part about where you said that this podcast is really a tribute to him and the work that he did for the family. One of the things that I do with a new client, the first 30 to 40 minutes of our first meeting that I have with a client, we talk about their childhood. That's all we talk about. We talk about where they came from, what was life like as a child. And it seems odd. Aren't we here to talk about money? Aren't we here here's our budget and here's our net worth and here's what we want to accomplish financially and in our life. Why are we rewinding decades? And I always and I believe this deeply. And I see it in my own life and I see it in everybody's life that I spend time with it. Whether we like it or not, we are a product of how we were raised. And some of us were taught, some of us weren't taught, but we were learning, we were absorbing what was around us, and most notably in our family unit, most notably. And there's other influences in our childhood as well, but we are absorbing all of that. And often we absorb the good and the bad. We can't discern. And often we absorb that from our parents because they're our parents. And we, I don't know, naively believe that our parents are perfect. And we naively believe that our parents know exactly what they're doing and they're always right. And so we take that and it kind of intertwines with who we are. And then when we become an adult, all of that directly influences how we live, how we view and handle our finances and our work. Like that work piece was such a big piece, it sounds like in your journey with your dad's example. And I can point to so many from my own family, good and bad. And I think it's important to really reflect back on where did we come from? And because of that, how might that impact how we view and handle work and money today as adults? Because I think there's some profound influences woven into the fabric of who we are. And for that reason, everybody is so unique. Like Joe, you grew up in such a different environment than I did. I grew up over here in the US in a small town west of Chicago. My family experience, my background's far different. And so you have your own unique perspective and view of the world, and I do as well. And I think that's why it's important that when we look at money, it's this whole idea it's never about money, that we really look at it through the lens of who are we and who do we aspire to be, because this whole one size fits all cookie cutter approach to work and money, I think there's some, I don't know, some general truths, some universal truths and principles in some of this, but so much of it is contextual to who you are and where you've been.
Mm, mm. True. So if we if we think about, if the audience are agreeing with some of our contentions here, that we need to move from the idea of being solely focused on money making to meaning making, how do we make that shift? Are there any tangible ways that we can make that shift? Is it just having the philosophical idea, or are there some kind of practical things that we can do?
I think maybe we need to go back to this assumption that we often have that money will make us happy. We pursue money because we think it will make us happy, though the science says it probably won't. They say it will up to a point and then it won't, but we're still pursuing more. So I don't think what people really want is money. I think what people really want is a meaningful life. They just think money is the way to get it. They think money is the answer to so many of these questions, so many of these problems. And that's a cultural phenomenon. That's just what was pushed down on them and what's pushed down on us and what we're pushing down on our kids. So I get about it this way. I always ask people, "What do you really want?" And they'll say, "I really wanna pay off my debt, and I wanna buy a house, and I wanna pay for my kids' college." And I'll say, "No, no, no. What do you really want?" And then they'll give me another answer, and I'll say, "No, no, no. What do you really want?" And after about 4 or 5 times of me annoyingly asking this question, we get to the truth. And the truth is so much deeper and more profound than I wanna pay off debt or I want to buy a house. The truth is it's very intense of what people really want. And once we know what we really want, then we just say, "Great, let's go do that. Let's do that." And, like, for example, here's an example. I wanna spend a lot of time with my kids. That's it. That comes out often. So the way it comes out, the way it plays out then is, so we're gonna work even more hours, trying to make even more money, grinding even harder away from the home, so that we can have enough money that we get to spend more time with the kids. Well, if spending more time with your kids when they're younger, if that's really what you want, how about we just do that?
I would argue there's a lot there's people spend a lifetime trying to do that and then never get out of it. And then of course there's the ultimate price you pay as well is that you become addicted to a way of being and a mode of being and find it really difficult to unwind. So even if you had the capability financially of stopping,
Mm,
you find it unnerving and difficult to stop, even though deep down you do want to stop and you want to spend time with your family. The whole idea of just like not rocking up to work and not having the comforts of the routine of the 20 years of toil or 30 years of toil is something that can be unnerving to people, unnatural.
mm. Yeah, it's hard to flip the switch off.
Yeah,
It is, and so this idea that if we really know what we want, and we're gonna be honest with ourselves to ask ourselves, "How do you really get there?" It often it rarely, I'll say rarely, involves money. It rarely involves money. We just bring money into it, and the irony is, when you then make it about money, the pursuit of the money to make it happen often sabotages your ability to do the thing that you said you really want. It's the great irony. And it reminded me, I had lunch with a friend today, and, my friend, he was up for a big promotion, and he applied for it, and he didn't get it. And I congratulated him on not getting it. I was so happy for him for not getting it because it would have been the worst thing for him, because he's in a role he really likes. But this I and he applied for it because, I don't know, it was a good opportunity, big pay increase, and more responsibility, more status, more pay, more all that. But I knew deep down that may not have been really what he wanted, because the things that would have come with the status and the pay and the responsibilities might have hindered this beautiful life that he has with his family that provides so much meaning. He's living his truly best life right now. And so I congratulated him for not getting the promotion because I think this was how it was supposed to work out.
brilliant. You know, Travis, I feel like we're on a bit of a crusade, a humble crusade, you and I, to actually promote these ideas. I'm interested in what's still to do for you and the resources and tools that our audience can use potentially if you have them. And I know that you do quite a lot of work in blogging your thoughts, and you have your obviously your own podcast. But perhaps you can give us a little feel for those that are interested in this idea and pursuing it a little bit more. What you have to offer.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I think in the next season of life, the speaking is definitely the piece of my career that I would really like to explore deeper, reaching different audiences, bigger audiences, and seeing if I can expand the impact in these principles. And yeah, the two main ways people can access me is the Meaning Over Money podcast. We put out 2 episodes a week. They're short form. They're usually 12 to 20 minutes, and just exploring these different ideas around work and money and meaning. And the blog, I publish a short form blog 7 days a week, and that's on my website, TravisShelton.com. And it's similar to the podcast in that we're just exploring different topics each day, and trying to really maneuver our way through this crazy world and this crazy journey of life, and to do it with so much meaning and so much passion, because I think people deserve that.
Mm, for sure. I'm looking forward to potentially collaborating further with you, obviously, in the future, because it just like as I go through some of the stuff that you're doing, I just resonate with it a lot. So, um, I was wondering, because you don't get away without answering this, of course. Gary, who is a friend of yours as well, who was on our podcast, the Generosity Monk, Gary Hogue, um, had to answer this question as well. What is your spirit animal and why?
I should have thought about this more. I've been
Yes.
fascinated by other people's answers. My spirit animal. All right, I'm gonna need a second to think about this. Boy, I don't
Yeah,
know why
that's all
this
right.
caught me off. I don't know why this caught me off guard.
Well, that's because you're intellectualizing it. It's a feeling exercise. Apparently, that's what people tell me. Just what do you feel? What is like, what comes out? I'm usually a bear for some reason. I'm not sure what that says about me.
All right. After much consideration, I think my spirit
I did get
animal.
you. I got you there. I got you. I mean, you were you. I tried before with all of the difficult questions I threw at you. You nailed it, and then you got caught on the spirit animal question.
Oh yeah, that all the other stuff was easy. This is like that gotcha question. I think that my spirit animal is a tortoise, and that's a weird answer. And here's why. I think that I find myself to be aggressively patient, as my friend
Mm,
TJ would say. And
mm,
the tortoise, it never seems like they're making that much progress, and all the odds are against them every step of the way, but they just keep going. And they're patient, but they're aggressive in the patience, and you just keep going. And I think ultimately I just trust in what we're doing here, and I don't often see the fruit on a daily basis, but I trust in what we do, and I believe in what we do. And so there's this idea of being aggressively patient, and maybe the tortoise best represents that idea.
I love that. I mean, it's really for me. It makes sense at the moment in my life. I feel like I'm passively impatient, and I need to flick the switch because it's not my usual predisposition. But I love this idea of aggressive patience, being methodical, moving forward, but understanding that everything has its time and not putting too much pressure on yourself. Yeah, that's great. It's a great answer. I'm glad I stumped you because it came up with a bit of gold in the end.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I like that. Yeah, sorry
Well,
about the editing.
that's okay. This was a brilliantly fun episode, and testament to you that, I mean, I just let you run with it, and I was actually fascinated. So I just enjoyed listening, like the rest of our guests, to this, and I kind of see it as a bit of a summarization of all that I am learning in the journey, and I'm not sure where we're up to. I think around 43 or 44 episodes now. So, it was a brilliant sort of summary of everything that this podcast is really about. So thank you for joining me. And yeah, I'm sure our audience is absolutely going to love it.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I don't take that for granted. And I have a feeling this will not be the last time we speak.
I agree. Thanks for coming on.
I hope that this one was enjoyable to listen to and there were some moments of value. If you have resonated in any way with the sentiments of this podcast, we would be delighted to direct you to our website, www.itsneveraboutmoney.com.au for more free resources and education aimed at improving your capacity to make sound financial decisions for the benefit of your family. We wish you every success, however you define it.